I'm going to show you some tricks. I think I might have shown you one of them before, but I find these invaluable. Hopefully, I'm going to introduce you to a clock face. Now, many of you have met a clock face before, and some of you have even got a clock face on your wrist, a watch. And it is a very useful tool for helping you with perspective. Now, I'm not going to give you a whole perspective lesson at the moment. That will come later. Just for now, I'm showing you how to make these tools. Now, I said that this is called acetate. These particular ones, you can see that this has got a funny edge there. That's because I took it off a document that I got from my accountant. He puts my tax details and that into a little booklet, and he binds it together, and he puts one of these plastic sheets on the top. So in newsagents you can get them, and they're called lots of different things. So they used to be called overhead projection sheets when we used to use overhead projection. It is actually an acetate sheet, which is a type of plastic. It is sometimes called a document cover. So as long as it's a see-through piece, but it's quite stiff. So for the clock, we need a stiff sheet. This won't be that helpful for the clock. And what you can see is I printed that off the internet. There are two different pens that we're going to use today, and it's a little bit important that you remember which is which. It's only a little bit important because seriously it's just a piece of plastic and you can throw it away or you can redo things. The first one is, and what we're going to use for the clock case, is a permanent pen. Just trying to get my hair out the way underneath there. So a permanent marker. Try and get one that is a little bit thin, so not too thick. This particular one I love. It's actually quite a cheap brand, but it's absolutely perfect. It's called a Stay Anywhere permanent pen. If you're going to get a Sharpie, they are permanent. Get one with a thin tip for this. And the reason we want that is so that once it's down, that's going to smudge. Oh, that's how quickly it's dried. So we want that to be permanent. The other pen we're going to use today is a whiteboard marker. Now these are sometimes called dry erase, but usually called whiteboard. And why they are good is because, oh, that one's running out. I had a suspicion that I might get one that's running out. Hello Gerda, welcome to the session today. So why we use a whiteboard marker is if we want to come back and rub it out, and it is called dry erase because you don't wet it to erase it, you erase it with a dry tissue. Okay, so that you can reuse the plastic with that. One more trick with these pens. If you do make a mistake and you write with your permanent marker, come with a whiteboard marker and color over it, and you can see that it gets rid of it. Now that was my whiteboard marker that wasn't working. Let's see if this one will. So that's a little, if you ever write on a whiteboard with a permanent marker and you want to get rid of it, put some whiteboard marker over it and it will get rid of it. Now, just in case nobody knows, this is an ordinary texter, and the reason we don't use that is because it kind of balls up on there, and I wasn't swearing. You can see it doesn't work very well. So you do need either a permanent marker or a whiteboard marker if you want to erase it. Okay, so let's get back to our clock face. I have done one earlier to show you, but I'll just quickly show you what you need. You need to get a ruler. It doesn't have to actually have measurements. You can use just a straight edge. So if you've got a straight edge, what you're going to do is draw from one side of that clock face to the other with your permanent marker. So if you've got a clock face that's got a dot in the middle, that's actually quite helpful as well. You can see that these things are quite thick, the lines of the numbers. So I'm placing this somewhere in the middle of that line, so it goes through the dot in the middle. And you go around the whole clock face like that, and of course you can write 6 and you can write the time on there. Okay, so that's what it looks like, and I'll show you. Here's one I did earlier, I prepared earlier. So now we need to say, I need to show you how we're going to use this. One of my favorite books from South Africa, and indeed my parents also had one, so I now have 2 of these books in my home, and I have done many photographs or paintings and drawings from these photographs. They are so beautiful. I wonder if any of you have got this book. Look how exquisite these drawings are. Okay, so I've picked out an old home here, typical house in Graaff-Reinet. How's my Afrikaans? Graaff-Reinet. Established in 1785, Graaff-Reinet is the 3rd oldest country town in South Africa, and many of its buildings have been carefully restored. How's that? Okay, so what is this clock all about? I can't, unfortunately, in this setup, show you how to use these things out in the open. In fact, maybe when the weather gets better, maybe I'll take my camera out and I'll actually do a demo out en plein air, out in a park somewhere, and I'll be able to show you with an actual view. So for now, I'm showing you with a photograph, but if you imagine putting that, can you, oh, you probably can't see, I've raised this clock face is a little bit higher, you know, it's about that high off the page, as if I'm looking at that building. Okay, so it would be between you and me. You can't see that there, but you'll be able to see it in front of my face. Okay, so when you look like that, the object of this exercise, and I am actually going to drop it down to make things easier, the object of the exercise is to check the angles of your perspective. And it is so difficult sometimes when you are looking at buildings. You get very confused. I know I connected that. I chose that one. I've just noticed here, look at that gorgeous photograph. You could use it for even things like the perspective of this table. Okay, and if you place, yes, you can see that, if you place the center of your clock on one of the corners of the perspective that you're looking at, you will see that the line of that table goes somewhere between 2 and 3. It's about at 2:30. Yeah? And that thin little line there, that line there is close to 9:30, but it's a little bit closer to the 10, so it's probably 25 to 10. So you've got 2 arms like that. Actually, I will draw that in with the red marker. Now you wouldn't be drawing on it when you use this for outdoors, but just so that you can see the technique. If I now take that away onto a white page, can you see that I've now got a line there which is about halfway, and I've got that line there which is about halfway. So it's not a perfect rendition, but if I wanted to draw that table on my paper, see, I told you I wasn't going to draw, and now I've lied to you all. So if I'm drawing that table on the paper, and I know that that's 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and that's 9 o'clock, 3 o'clock, the angle of my table there is at about 2:30. So I'm guessing 1, 2, 3, and it's about at 2:30. And that one is about at 10:30. So that's 9 and 10 and 11 and 12. I can even put it down there. And this is a bit more complicated. I can kind of go, okay, so the edge of my table is like that. Now, you don't need to get that complicated. It is just so that we can transfer those angles easily to the page, because we tend to get confused about angles when it comes to perspective. So if I go back to this lovely old home, I can see this time I'm going to put the 12, 6 o'clock up against a vertical of one of these columns, okay? So it's very helpful to do that. And I can tell that whoever took this photograph was nearly at the same height, maybe the road was slightly higher, as the roof line of that house, of the veranda, because that is just nearly horizontal. But this one going away is going away at a sharper angle than that. In fact, that one's going up, which is quite interesting, and that angle is going down. So if I take it down now to the brick edge of the veranda, this does look like it is a little bit crooked, I have to say. So the houses, depending on how old they are, can be physically a little bit crooked. But you can see that the line of that veranda brick is going slightly up. Can you see that? According to the clock face, there's the horizontal, and there's a slight angle coming down. So if I bring that down to where the top of the veranda wall hits the corner, I can see it going very slightly up, about 9:10. But if I take it up to the corner of the roof, for example, that's going to be going down to our horizon, and that's going to be going up to the horizon. So now I can see that that line is going down. So that line, if we put our whiteboard marker on there, that's at about 20 to 9, something like that. It just means that we've got some kind of measure that we can relate to. So we can all relate to clocks, and we know that that is more or less, you know, it's more than halfway, so it's not quite 8:30, it's closer to 9 o'clock. So that when we draw it, we can make sure where our angles are going, and we don't have to remember that it's 35 degrees and use a protractor and get involved with maths. It's really so useful holding that up to see how things line up. So that is your clock face, and hopefully we will do a perspective lesson, and I'll talk about your clock face again. Even if you haven't got a clock face, you can even just imagine a corner like that. Are you seeing that? And you can imagine, is it close to 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, that sort of thing. Okay. The next thing is a little bit easier. It's a similar situation, and in fact I did mention this when we did our our grid drawing, our grid exercise. Excuse me. I'm pleased to know that you're learning, Toki. You've got lots to catch up on. The videos are all on replay, both on the video link in this Facebook group or on the YouTube link, and I'm going to send out the YouTube link probably tomorrow. Okay, so what I've done on this sheet, and I've also put it on a stiff piece, is I've simply drawn two lines, a vertical line and a horizontal line. And it does help if you draw that parallel to the edge. So I had this piece of cardboard, and I put it on the edge of the plastic, and I just ruled that also with a permanent marker, and then I turned it around, and I wanted that one a bit further in, and I just ruled that. Now, what are these for? If you remember in the grid lesson, I said that the simplification of the grid and how you can take the grid to use visually when you're actually looking at something, whereas the grid you can only really use if you're using a photograph. You can hold this up and compare how horizontal things are. I'm just looking for another lovely picture to use. I thought that I had used more. I thought I'd found more pictures to use, but clearly not enough. Okay, let's say this little group of people here. Aren't they gorgeous? 296, washing day near Coffee Bay. Washing is beaten clean on the flat rock surfaces. Okay, if you're doing something like this, if you're doing a group of people, even if you're doing a tree and a bench, it doesn't matter what your subject is. I want to show you how you would use this. It's very important that you line things up. So if I wanted to look at this and I was drawing this little boy here, and I wanted to say, okay, that's the top of his head. On the horizontal, where would his head line up with other people in the picture? And if you know anything about perspective, all the heads should really line up very well, okay? But he's a child, he's not an adult, so the children's heads more or less line up, okay? But these two mums, presumably they're mums, but they're adults nonetheless, their heads are higher, and this lady's head is much higher even than that lady's head, and that's because this rock face is going up, because if it was flat, her head would be at the same height. So let's go to these little, this is a tiny one, I hope you can see it. This is a group of cattle being herded, and can you see how the horizontal line gives you where are these cattle in relation to each other? Where are these heads in relation to the heads of the cattle? So you can see everything that is crossing that horizontal line. Now, by the same token, you can see everything that is crossing the vertical line. Okay, so let's say you were drawing these 4, 2, 3 gnu, these gnus, bridled gnu. Let's even say you were drawing this one. Okay, this time we're going to use the vertical line. So if I put the vertical line straight through his snout, straight down the middle, you can see that the middle of his neck, the hump across his back, that runs beautifully right down. But you can see that there's a little shape along the side there, but most of his body is on that side of your line. And you can see, you can get an idea of how to line things up in your picture, okay? So if I go over there, and I've moved it over against his rump, against his bum, you can see that his hoof, his back hoof, is lining up exactly with the back there. So it's really, really useful to know where things line up. If we go down to the rhino, I can see, now I'm using the side edge of the page as my reference for verticals and horizontals. And in this case, these photographs are also vertical and horizontal. So if I put the horizontal under his head, I can see that the bottom of it is just below his knee there. So if I'm drawing this rhino, I need to know that if I draw his head, let's say that's his head, that his knee, I should have started a bit higher. Let's start a bit higher. Thanks, Joyce. I'm glad you're learning lots. Okay, so let's say I've put the rhino head in like that, okay, and then I'm no longer thinking about the rhino head, and I put the big body on. Let's see, can you see that? And I don't think about the rhino, and I put his big leg in there, and I put his big leg in there. Can you see that I've totally ignored, even though I'm not trying to draw it perfectly, but I've totally ignored the relative position of that head to his legs. But if I come back and look at the photograph and I just use my horizontal, I can see where is that head relative to his legs. And even vertically I can go, where is the bottom? You can use both actually. Look at that. I've used the vertical and the horizontal, and I've gone, where does this vertical line up? It's on the right side of where the head ends, and it goes, you can see the angle of the leg as it comes in against the vertical and the horizontal. Now, many times in my classes, I get people to use their pencils as a vertical measure and as a horizontal measure. So it's very, very useful. So your pencil can be used for lots and lots of things besides actually drawing. The beauty with this, though, is that it's a thin line and you haven't got the pencil obscuring what you're looking at. Okay? So that's why this is really useful. You could probably even put it, you could use the vertical and the horizontal of your clock if you didn't want to have two different pieces of plastic. It's exactly the same thing. Can you see? I've put it horizontal there, and it's giving me the same information. Okay, so that is our vertical and horizontal. Okay, how much time am I taking? That's very lovely of you to say, Deborah. Thank you very, very much for that. Okay, next trick. The next trick is a very quick reference. So all of these can lead to much, much longer demonstrations. So this is all about just making these things for yourself. Okay, the next trick is a viewfinder. Now, a viewfinder is literally what it sounds like. It's for finding a view, okay? And your cameras on your phones are viewfinders. It's pretty much what they are. And in fact, every camera on a phone has got the possibility of having crosshairs on it, okay? And the reason for that, and this is all in my book, the reason for that is called the rule of thirds. I'm not going to go madly into it, but it is based on good composition points that we need thirds on that. Now, this particular one has been cut out of cardboard, and I have strung some cotton across. You can see I can stick my finger right through to help me see where my rule of thirds is when I'm looking for a view. And it's pretty much like a camera. If I bring this closer and closer to the camera, you can see less and less of that flower, or it's filling that whole view. If I bring it all the way up, can I do that? You can see more of the flower. And if I drop it down further away from me, now we can just see the center. And the same thing happens when you're holding that viewfinder up close or close to the camera. Okay, so if I do that, it's close to you. You can only see a little bit, itty bit of me. And if I do that, you can see an even smaller bit of me. Okay, you can make a viewfinder even just with your fingers. Okay, and here's another one as well. You're always drawing, okay, avoiding drawing buildings. Yep. I'm glad you're going to try it again. But Bertha, perspective is a whole, it's a whole lesson and not only one lesson in itself. So this is just a useful tool. But if you understand those principles, then it'll be very, very helpful. Okay, getting back to our viewfinder. Again, this should be on a stiff piece. So I'm going to get my horizontal. I thought of a different way of making a viewfinder that you don't actually need to cut out. And I've drawn a couple, actually I printed those two, and I estimated the spaces, but on this one I actually measured them, so this is the one that I'm going to use. If you actually draw it on a piece of plastic, you can cut it out, I'll show you that in a second, and use a bit of tape to enclose it, and that way you don't need to have this string across. So I'm quickly going to draw that on. I'm doing it very, very quickly. I'm not doing it carefully with the ruler because I don't want to waste your time. You, of course, will do it much more quickly than, much more carefully than I did. Okay, so I've just quickly traced that off without worrying about it. And if you want to enclose that, I'm going to use a bit of masking tape, and I'm going to stick it around, because the whole point of the viewfinder is only to look at what's inside there. So if you've got clear plastic running off, then that's not going to be very helpful. So viewfinders are usually used for landscape drawings because landscapes are so big that it's very daunting. So you pick up your viewfinder or your camera and you zoom in on something. But they are also very useful for anything. Okay, for what are they called? Still lives, or for life drawing. And so you can cut that out. I didn't bring a knife or a scissors, and you've now got a viewfinder which is, very, very similar to that, but it's got hard plastic. And the other thing that can happen with this viewfinder is you can change the size, or you can get a whole sheet and you can put lots of different sizes on. Now, those thirds are just there for an idea. They do not need to be perfect in terms of exactly thirds. This is just to give you an idea. So there I've just made a quick square one, and I'm going to go, okay, I'm going to estimate that my thirds around are like that. And I can, so now I've got two viewfinders. I've got a square one, a bit wonky, and I've got a rectangular one. So now let's get to our lovely book. Now this is a trick that, Jasminka, I need to see what you're saying. Let's translate what you're saying to me. You need to look at the phone running out of batteries. Tricks are great. I'm looking at your YouTube again tomorrow. Very well. So Jasminka's got a lovely trick. when she watches the YouTube, she can put translation on and get subtitles. So that's a really useful trick. Okay, this is a trick that I found absolutely brilliant for photographs. So if you've got holiday snaps that you like using, now this book, all these photographs are beautifully, beautifully composed. So finding another composition in here is going to be a bit strange because they're already so good. But again, I'm showing you on a photograph. You'll be looking at it in nature or outside, that sort of thing. But if you want to find some more compositions from your photographs, look how putting this down on a photograph can show you lots and lots of different perspectives. And if I use my third lines, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go, okay, I'm going to put the beach on the third line and have the things above the third line. Or I can put, no, that one's not going to work. Here's one. Okay, so I can put the horizon, the edge, the edge of the field there on that third, and then the mountain is on that third, and then the edge of the house, the pointy part of the house is on that third, and that gives you a lovely composition. Okay, so that is making a viewfinder with your piece of plastic. Okay, lovely technique. Where are we? Is that just the third one? Goodness gracious, I talk a lot. Okay, I thought I was going to zoom through all these 5. Okay, next one quickly is shapes of tone. So you've been looking at a number of my videos which are about shapes of tone, and this time I'm going to put a photograph, and you've seen this photograph before as well. I'm going to put it in a document sleeve this time so that I can just put my photograph in. This is not very helpful for live drawings, but it is very helpful for photographs, and it's a very, very good exercise. The photograph that was in the email actually comes from my book, and this is an exercise in there, and this is quite helpful to trace off not only shapes of tone but shapes of your actual items. But I use it with half closed eyes to get these shapes of tone. I don't remember if I've shown you this before. I may have. So I'm not drawing around the leaves, I'm drawing around the different shapes of tone. I know that I've done a negative shape exercise as well, and you could use it for seeing negative shape as well, so that you could get the correct shapes. But in this instance, I'm trying to actually do shapes of tone not very well because I'm hurrying through. So when you actually take your piece out and you just look at it on a white background, you can suddenly see those shapes of tone. Now I know that here it's going from dark to light very gradually, but it is sometimes useful to put a sharp edge on just so you understand where these shapes are, so that when you then draw them, you've got those shapes for reference. Now you can't really show the different shapes of tone by coloring in with this, but that gives you a rough idea of, you know, how do I look at these photographs. Now of course you can do this on a piece of acetate as well. I just find it useful to put that inside. Okay, so that's shapes of tone, and our last trick, shapes of tone or negative shapes. Our last trick again is one of my favorite, and this is another South African book. It's called Cape Town Images, collection of photograph highlights from the Argus. Does the Argus still exist? Newspaper, Cape Town newspaper. And I find this trick very, very useful for drawing people, for finding out what is going on with people. And there's lots of tricks to drawing people. We will definitely have a session with that. I'm ruining what I can see on the screen because I'm putting my book on top of my computer. There we go. Hello Irene, you're watching from Denmark. Oh, is it freezing in Denmark? It's pretty cold up in Perth. And for those of you in South Africa, we've got a Denmark down south of WA. It's not the Denmark in Europe. I don't think anyone's leaving their countries at the moment. Okay. This is a very, very clever trick if you want to analyze what a body is doing, the angles of a body, and this does also only work on photographs. It would be very difficult to hold it up against a real person. And what I'm going to do is I am going to draw the internal stick figure of this skater, and I am going to draw it not like a hangman. So a typical hangman looks like that. Okay, I'm not going to use that stick figure. I'm going to use a stick figure that has got a head and it's got shoulders, and then the spine and hips, and then the legs come off the hips and the arms come off the shoulders. Okay, so it's slightly more helpful than that typical hangman figure. So what you have to do is, over your person, you're going to go, okay, her hip goes from about there to there. Now, I don't know if you can actually see that. You might have to wait and see what it looks like when I take it away from the picture. Can you see the red more easily? No, I think the green shows up better. I'll show you in a sec. So I'm drawing from the center of her hip, so where her leg comes out of it, and I'm going to her opposite hip. Now, her shoulders are not like that, they're turned. So if the shoulders are completely turned, you would only see one tip there. You wouldn't see the whole line, but we can imagine that one shoulder is there, even though the arm is coming straight out, and the other shoulder is there, so her shoulders are actually doing that, okay? And her spine is kind of doing that. Her arm is going up from there. This arm is foreshortened, so you may have seen my foreshortened video. And this leg goes out there with a foot on it. And this leg, okay, clearly where I've drawn that hip is nowhere near where it is, because her leg is actually joining there. Okay, so her hip is actually doing that. So that's the kind of thing you find out. Oh, maybe I should do a head. That's the kind of thing you find out if you trace over that that person and you get their inner stick figure, and there you've got it. So what we've actually got here is an understanding of what is going on with this body. And there, that arm, we never would have drawn it that short because we don't like foreshortening. But we can now actually see more or less what's going on with that body. So her shoulders there. So if you've got an understanding of what's going on, a bit like that clock face, then you can translate that onto your page. And sometimes, I don't know if this will work, sometimes I even put a Michelin Man body on it. Don't know if it's actually going to work. Now obviously your legs, the bones in your arms and legs don't go right through the center like that. So this is not accurate in terms of the body shapes, but it is helpful in knowing what's going on. You can actually see what's going on. I wish you all well. Enjoy your winter. Stay safe. Karen Frankel signing out with a Get Drawing. Bye-bye.